In my eyes, the mid-2000s was the pinnacle of personal luxury and luxury convertibles, like the Toyota Solara, Mercedes-Benz CLK, and the Chrysler Sebring. Around that same time, Volvo decided to join the mix with the C70, which was based off of the S40 sedan and also the C30 hatchback. Today, let's look at Sweden's version of the Toyota Solara, the P1 Volvo C70. This C70 in particular belongs to my partner Michael's grandparents. It's a 2011 C70 T5 in Ember Black. And if anyone remembers Ember Black, you'll remember that my XC90 Thor actually was this same color. It's one of my favorite darker Volvo colors because it's a black with a hint of brown. Volvo first released the P1 generation of the C70 in 2006. This one being a 2011 makes it a post-refresh C70, so it has a new face, a new rear end, a slightly revised interior, and different wheel designs. The only downside to me with these post-facelift C70s is the lack of a manual transmission. These only came in one trim level as the C70 T5 automatic. However, this one does have a few options added on, like the HID headlights, power folding mirrors with the blind spot monitor system, keyless entry, and also an upgraded audio system. I've always liked how older Volvos give you a little bit more variety in terms of wheel design. The more base spec C70 T5 will have a 17-inch alloy wheel. You'll see most of them with those, but optional is this 18-inch R-Design-esque alloy wheel. I think these are also available on the C30. One of the biggest selling points of these is the drop top. Volvo says that this works in 30 seconds, but the only downside of this to me is that you have to be stopped and on the brake. But it's pretty cool to watch. You also have to keep holding the button too. If I let go, it stops. If I push back, it'll keep going. And then it'll beep to tell you that the top is fully down, and now you can be a cruiser. The C70 was only available with one engine option throughout the years, but there's an admirable spec of, the hood latch is really far away, but you could get a model before 2011 with a manual transmission. The C70 T5 uses the B525-4T3. What an engine code! But it's a 2.5 liter 5-cylinder turbo. It's the same engine that you'll find in the S40 T5 and the V50 T5. And also the C30 T5. In this application, it makes 227 horsepower and 236 pound-feet of torque. Power only goes to the front wheels and a 5-speed automatic. As for MPGs, Volvo claims 19 in the city and 28 on the highway. I've been getting about 20 in the time I've been driving this. 0 to 60 for this 3,600 pound vessel is just over 7 seconds. And if that isn't enough power for you, Volvo does offer an in-house Polestar tune for the 2.5 turbo in these. But if that's still not enough power for you, companies like Hilton and Elevate offer tunes to squeeze even a little bit more power out of these. Now, one of the things that I like about C70s with the facelift are the taillights. They have the newer LED design and they just look a little bit crisper and more premium than the old one. But one of the compromises that a lot of people suffer from with hardtop convertibles is trunk space. And luckily the C70 doesn't really make that big of a nuisance. This isn't a power trunk lid, and it's not soft close either, but there's a lot of room with the top up. Volvo claims 13 cubic feet of volume with the top up, but there's also this retractable shelf, which kind of determines how much space you have underneath that. With the top down, you have about 7 cubic feet of volume. This one does have the spare tire in it, so you lose a little bit of that as well. If you're going on road trips, keep that top up. Now, since the Solara uses a soft top, that folds in a little bit of a different manner, so it's not as restrictive in terms of space than this, but For being a hardtop, it's not bad. So just for you, I'm gonna try to get into the back seat of this car. You can already see there's not a lot of room, but Volvo does make it a little bit easy at least. First of all, there's a button on each of the front seats to slide them forward, and of course, a handle to flip them forward as well. But let's try and see. Of course, since the top is down, it's really easy, but okay, kind of comfortable. But let's see here. If I recline this back and slide this back. Oh! So I'm 5'9" and the driver's seat is in my position, how I sit, which is very surprising. My feet do fit, damn it. This is every video since then. Since the R50 video, I've done that. But my feet do fit under this seat. I can't really move them too much. And I don't have like a lot of leg room, but I'm actually kind of comfortable. 4 of me could fit in this car. I wouldn't expect much headroom if you're over 6 feet tall, but me being under 6 feet tall, I'm actually kind of comfortable back here. There's 2 cup holders with a little roly-poly tray, and the seats themselves are actually very soft. In terms of creature comforts, of course, seat belts, there is an not armrest. This just comes out, this seems like some secret storage compartment. While I'm speaking about secret compartments on both sides, if you push, there's a little bit of storage over here, which I'd never noticed. The front seats, on the other hand, are really comfortable. You have an 8-way power driver's seat and an 8-way power passenger seat, and both seats are heated. I'll always applaud the P1 and P2 generations of Volvo for having the best seats. New Volvo seats are not as good as these. The steering wheel is a 3-spoked leather-wrapped wheel, the same one that you'll find on other P1 Volvos. This one has a bit of aluminum, and it's real aluminum on the top of it. The horn is nice Volvo sounding horn. The buttons on the left side control the cruise control functions, and the buttons on the right side control the Bluetooth and audio functions. Now, although the interiors of these are pretty well appointed, like soft touch materials on the dash, actual aluminum pieces on the interior, I've never been that big of a fan of the interiors of these P1 Volvos, mostly because you can't change the head unit in them. They all come with this waterfall design center stack, which has a lot of buttons, but it does look intimidating, but once you get used to it, it's not that bad. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's my biggest gripe. At least in 2023, there's no worthwhile aftermarket infotainment systems that actually fit in these cars. The gauges in these are also pretty nice as well. You have a nice silver ring around them, like the more modern Volvos, but it's all analog. Although the gauges are simple, you still have a trip computer. There's a rotating dial on the turn signal stalk, which actually scrolls through all kinds of information, mostly related to fuel economy and average speed. Some of these could get an optional navigation system, which pops out of the dash up here, but there would be some buttons on the back side of the wheel to control that. Now, the waterfall. It is pretty minimalistic if you take a long gander at it, but there's certainly a lot of buttons. There's a whole keypad over here, which can dial phone numbers and also give you presets for the radio. This one actually has the base sound system, so it doesn't have the upgraded Dyne audio system on higher packaged models. For what it is, it sounds pretty decent even with the top down, so I'm not going to criticize too much. The buttons below the keypad control the little tiny screen underneath the CD drive. That's the only screen that you have in this in terms of infotainment. The climate control is pretty simple to use, but it is also weirdly simplistic. It is dual zone and it is automatic, but there's only one dial to control the temperature. If you push once, it will control the left side. If you push again, it'll control the right side, and if you push again, it'll control both sides in sync. Even me, when I first started getting into these P1s, that confused me. The cup holders are also reasonably sized, but there's only 2 cup holders for the front passengers and 2 for the back. There's nothing on the door pockets though. The armrest is nicely padded with some stitching, and also it's not too small with an aux jack and a USB port. I honestly expected the C70 to drive a little bit different than how it actually does. It just feels a lot lighter than I anticipated. I thought it would be a little bit more boat-like and yacht, land yacht-like almost. Let's see here. The engine is a bit loud, but I do like the sound of the 5-cylinder. It's a nice, smooth sound. It's actually, like, it feels quick. It's not a fast car, but it is light on its feet for what it is. It's smooth, like, consistent power. I like the sound of the 5-cylinder, but in this later version of this 2.5, in the P1s, to me it doesn't sound as good as the older ones. But, of course, this is a C70. You're not really going to be going after exhaust points and sound points and street cred and all that. With the top up, just like the Solara, I hear a few creaks and rattles, mostly from the top, not from the interior itself. I do have to say this does feel a little bit better built than the Solaras of the same vintage, because those rattle around the A-pillars a lot. Let us see how this does from a stop though. Let's see here. The brakes are pretty decent. A good power. Like, it feels like 7 seconds to 60. Like, really around town or merging on the highway, the power of this car feels wonderful. I mean, it's not fast, like I say. Like I've said, it's not fast, but it's perfectly adequate for what it is. It feels a little bit more spirited than a Solara as well. Throttle response is nice and taut at low speeds as well. Steering, when you're throwing this around corners, that's when it really does feel like not a big car, but this is not meant to be blasting down back roads just like how you'd be in a V70R or even a C30. Yeah, like it scoots out of its own way, but this is really not any speedster. I would go for the Polestar tune if you want some more performance, but in terms of making this like an actually sporty car, I'm not sure how much you could do. Like, the steering is sharp and direct. There is some body roll, but it's not that bad. I think for me, there's just not enough steering feel, and also the steering, Volvo made it light to make the car feel lighter than it is. This is 3,600 pounds. Something about these front-wheel drives is that they love burning rubber. Well, not burning rubber, but they love spinning from a stop, especially these Turbo 5s. With a cruising mindset, you'll actually come to appreciate this car a lot because you are isolated from the road. The suspension does a very good job at that, and also the steering. If you start to hustle it, that's when you really, I don't want to say it'll fall apart, because the brakes are responsive. The suspension is very compliant even on these rougher country roads. Every time I see a dirt road, I have to look at it. The driving experience changes quite a bit when you have the top down. I actually it's been less than a minute since I've driven with the top down, and I already feel more of the body flex, which it's something that most front drive convertibles like this will experience. I'm not gonna critique it, but it's quite enjoyable to drive with the top down. When you're cruising, the engine is really quiet. The ride, this thing just floats over even some pretty harsh bumps. The brakes are nice and smooth. It is so easy to drive this car smoothly, and it's almost effortless. It's a little bit more enjoyable to drive than a Solara. I keep going back and forth between this and the Solara just because that's the only one of these that I've driven more than this car. I do have to say, I really enjoy driving convertibles. The drop top vibes are immaculate, especially on warmer days like, well, not exactly today, but just warmer days in general. However, the C70 personally is not my type of convertible, but it is a fantastic cruising car. I just like the driving dynamics of stuff like S2000s. The main competitor to the C70 that I would see is the Toyota Solara. I wouldn't really compare this to the Mercedes convertibles because those are rear-wheel drive, but ultimately the choice is yours. Do you want a C70 or a Solara? You can argue in the comments about that. Thank you for tagging along and looking at this C70 with me today. Also, thanks to Mike for letting me look at his C70 today. And let me know in the comments if you have one of these or even any P1. So that applies to a V50, S40, C30. They're all cool cars. But enough of me rambling about Volvos now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, peeps.